So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Clerens. I'm Secretary General of EASE, the European Association for Storage of Energy. And EASE is basically these members. Companies which are doing either research, building components, equipment, but also operating these plants, distribution system operators, transmission system operators, the whole chain. Everyone is in this association. And I'm here because I want to share with you today that energy storage is awesome. It's not only awesome because it can do a lot, it can solve problems, but because it brings also energy from today to tomorrow. And I will show you why it's needed and more needed in a system. This is the growth of energy storage in Europe in the last years. And you see it's everywhere. It's behind the meter, it's in front of the meter, it's residential, industrial, you see it a bit everywhere. So install it in the grid and you install it in industries where you can lower the connection cost, or you do it at home where you want to consume your own photovoltaic and basically therefore can stop to make this net metering, which is putting a strain and a cost on the system. This is the new regulation in Europe everybody talked about, the Clean Energy for All Europeans package. This is on the left-hand side. You can see the staple of documents, which everyone who worked on this clean energy package had to read, to digest, and to understand, and then try to influence. Energy storage is mentioned 135 times in this document, 135 times. Before, in the previous package, was mentioned 0 times, not once. So you see the evolution since 2009, in 10 years' time, where we are today. And when you look a bit more into the details what is in, and I will not maybe go to all details, but for the first time we have a definition of energy storage. Nobody knew what energy storage was. And the biggest question, and when we come to the grid costs and the fees, is what is storage? So is it storage if I take electricity and I make a hydrogen gas, a renewable gas? Is it storage if I take electricity and make heat or cold and use it in the system? The answer is yes, it is energy storage for the European Commission, for the Honorable European Commission. It clarifies the question of ownership. Who may own it? Who may operate it? We have seen, thanks to Christian, a graph, how it is done. But it's not really clear. It's not really clear how you can implement it. And EASE is working on a document for the moment called mixed business cases, where regulated entities owning it and uses it only for the grid services. Let's say you don't build a second line. And for the rest of the time, you give it to the market. And a market player comes in and uses the same device. So you have a mixed business case where you have a regulated entity and a market player coming together. And if you don't unbundle these activities between market activities and regulated activities, you will always create unfair competition and you will not create a market. So it's important to look in this. And then there is all the questions about access, but I will not go in this. This package is awesome because it shows that we need to be in equal treatment for storage and for other technologies. That the scarcity pricing should be in there. And the prices in electricity, we saw it before, actually there's no cap. So if the prices go through the roof, it's very economic to put your storage devices down and even live only from arbitrage, even if we heard and it's correct that you need to have more services. But it is a good step for storage. Then we see that there is the right for energy storage to participate in the markets, which is also new. We have all ancillary and balancing services needs to include storage. This is also new. And we have seen that we can participate in the just presented capacity remuneration mechanisms, which, by the way, in this document, limits the technologies who may participate, who may get paid, to any technology not emitting more than 550 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. So all the coal plants you have in India, if you follow these rules, would not be able to participate in any balancing markets. And that's also the situation in Europe. It's a whole discussion in Europe how to deal with this. But we would like to reduce the environmental footprint. We want to get carbon neutral by 2050, and this is the price to pay. So, about costs and charges. Very often you have double charges, double costs. And it was said by Christian just before also. I love this, because that's what's happening in Europe. That's what's happening in Europe. You can have for the same device a cost of 0, like Italy, Christian just said it, 0, And you can have 30 million, more than 30 million euros cost for the same storage device we moved virtually around Europe in different countries with the same load patterns and discharge pattern, everything the same. We just moved it around and we looked at the cost. And if you don't have a same approach in all states in India about this, but you have different regulations and on state level regulations and different costs, you will not create a level playing field. So this must be something you need to consider, and that's what we're pushing in Europe, and we were quite successful also on this. We heard it before. We need to access different revenue streams. If we only have the arbitrage, I buy cheap, I sell expensive, it's not enough. So all the other services need to be put on top of this. And the regulation must permit it. It must be possible to do so. In Europe, it is possible. These are the services. You don't need to learn them by heart. I will not ask you when you leave. But I want to show that you have this for generation, as it was said in the first presentation today, for this session, ancillary services, transmission infrastructure, distribution infrastructure, and also for the consumer and for the other activities. So you see that energy storage as such is not one technology, it's not one service, it's a multitude of services and a multitude of technologies coming together. And that's why it's so difficult to frame and so detailed. It's also available on our webpage if you want to get in the details. I wanted to highlight one point also. In Europe, the Renewable Energy Directive has foreseen that you cannot put the stress anymore on the system. If you are the one who is providing variation in your system, be it at home with PV, be it in a larger scale, you need to try to balance it yourself. So the directive, the Renewable Energy Directive says you may support it, but you must be pushed to get into the markets. So you need to bid into the day-ahead markets. We know everything about markets today. We know everything, you're all experts on markets now. And you need to bid, and this is what is happening. Renewable energy sources, when they were a small part of the system, nobody cared at all when they generated, because it could be absorbed without any problem. When they get to a situation where in Europe now, for 2030, we have identified that we want 32% of renewable energy in the final consumption, 32%. For electricity, this means we will have somewhere between 55 and 57 of all electricity consumed in Europe in 11 years from now come from renewables. More than half of all electricity in Europe consumed will come from renewables in 11 years, which means it's not a small player. So you need to make sure that they follow. They can destroy markets if they don't follow market rules, and that's why it's important that they also add to this. Finally, I want to have some thoughts I want to share with you about why is it, what do you need to do to implement it? First of all, you need to have real clarity about electricity flows. You need to understand all the electricity, where it goes. Also, all non-technical losses, everything. You need to understand where it goes if you want to create markets. Otherwise, it's not possible to create a market. This net metering, I said it before, it's using the grid as a storage device and not paying for this. And that's not working. Somebody else will pay for it. We believe you need to unbundle generation from transmission or distribution. These are different services. You have a monopoly on one side, on the other should the market play. This is the most efficient way. That's what we see in Europe, and that's what we're pushing for. We need to allow for different markets. We heard it about electricity, balancing, and so on. But we need also to be open-minded about the services. Because we see that in Europe we started with having system services of frequency containment reserve, which historically need to start to deliver in 30 seconds, the frequency containment reserve. Now we see that it's too long, 30 seconds. So there are specific services in UK, let's say, enhanced frequency reserve, or in Ireland, fast frequency reserve. And we need to have these services which incentivize the people to deliver what is needed to the system in less than a second, in milliseconds, because the system needs it. Today, in Europe, you get the same payment on the continent if you bring electricity in 30 seconds or in less than 1 second. Because you're paid by capacity for frequency containment. You're paid for the capacity. Since you're paid for your capacity, you're not earning more if you play more, if you deliver more. But in, I would guess now, 70–80% of the cases, in 30 seconds, the deviation is already solved. The batteries did it. But the one who did not work and the one who did work received the same payment. And that's not really fair. So you need to see that these services can adapt also to the evolution of the needs of the system. And we have said it, you need to have multiple revenue streams. And you need to have long-term services. Because if I invest today in a battery, I know that Mathieu tomorrow, no, next year or in 2 years can put the same battery down at 20% or 40% cheaper cost. So he can sell it at 20% or 40% cheaper because the battery price is going down. So why would I invest if I don't have a long-term signal, a long-term contract where I can hedge my risk? There's no investor who would do this. We had a workshop 15 months ago, and the guys told us, if I don't have a long revenue of 4 or 5 years, I will not invest in a battery. So that's what you need to take up. Some thoughts about this, and open then for the discussion and questions. Thank you.